Daniel Mercer had been sitting in a child-sized blue chair for almost 20 minutes. When the boy finally looked at him, the classroom was empty, the hallway lights were beginning to dim, and Daniel had not asked a single question. Then, in a voice so quiet Daniel almost thought he had imagined it, 10-year-old Eli Turner said 5 words. "Can we go home now? If stories about quiet acts of kindness still mean something to you, stay with me, because sometimes, the most important thing we can give another person is time." Eli Turner was 10 years old when he arrived at Daniel Mercer's house, with one backpack, a small cardboard box, and a jacket that was too thin for the weather. He had lost both of his parents, and had spent much of the previous year moving between temporary homes. By the time he entered Daniel's life, Eli had learned a simple habit. Keep your things packed. Do not ask for much, and never assume you are staying. School, Eli followed every rule. He arrived on time, he finished most of his work, he kept his desk neat. When the teacher asked the class to open their books, Eli opened his. When everyone lined up for lunch, Eli joined the line. When another child accidentally dropped a pencil, Eli sometimes picked it up and quietly placed it back on the desk. But he did not speak, not to his teacher, not to the children sitting beside him, not to the librarian, not even when someone asked him a direct question. His teacher, Mrs. Nolan, never punished him for it. She learned to offer choices he could answer, with a nod or a shake of his head. "Would you like the blue worksheet?" Eli nodded. "Do you want to sit near the window?" A small shake of his head, and that was enough. At Daniel's house, things were only slightly different. During Eli's first week there, Daniel heard perhaps 6 or 7 words altogether. Water. No, thank you. Good night. Each word seemed to cost the boy something. So Daniel never celebrated when Eli spoke. He sensed that applause would only turn those small moments into another kind of pressure. Instead, he answered normally. "Water's in the kitchen." "All right. Good night, Eli." And then, he carried on. Daniel Mercer was 47, he repaired heating systems for a living, and had the permanently rough hands of someone who had spent years carrying tools into basements and crawling underneath old buildings. He was not especially good at emotional speeches. He did not know clever ways to make children laugh. And when Eli first came to live with him, Daniel worried constantly that he was doing something wrong, so he focused on ordinary things. He left a small lamp on in the hallway at night. He kept the same cereal in the cupboard. After noticing Eli ate it every morning, he gave Eli a drawer in the kitchen for snacks, and told him he never needed permission to take something from it. And perhaps most importantly, Daniel never told the boy that his house was his forever home. Daniel knew promises could sound frightening, when a child had heard too many promises before, so instead, he said something smaller. "You're staying here tonight." The next morning, he said it again. "You're staying here tonight." Days became weeks, and Daniel kept being there. Daniel received a call from Mrs. Nolan. Nothing terrible had happened, but she sounded concerned. The class had been preparing short presentations about something they loved. Students could talk about a pet, a favorite place, a hobby, anything they wanted. Mrs. Nolan had already told Eli that he did not have to speak, he could draw a picture instead, and Eli had drawn one. It showed a small wooden fishing dock stretching over a lake. 2 people sat at the end, one was small, one was tall. Daniel recognized the tall figure immediately. It was him. But when Mrs. Nolan gently asked Eli whether she could hang the drawing beside the other students' projects, Eli froze. Then, he folded the picture in half, he pushed it into his backpack, and when the final bell rang, he would not move from his desk. By the time Daniel arrived, almost everyone else had gone home. Eli was still sitting there. His backpack rested at his feet. Mrs. Nolan stood a few steps away. "I don't think he's in trouble," she whispered. "I think today was just too much." Daniel nodded, then he looked at Eli. Every instinct told him to fix it, ask what happened, tell him everything was okay. Nobody was angry. Daniel nearly did. Instead, he walked across the room, and noticed an empty student chair beside Eli's desk. He pulled it out, and sat down. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. Daniel rested his hands on his knees. Eli stared at the floor. Mrs. Nolan quietly returned to her desk, and pretended to organize papers. 5 minutes passed. Then 10 outside. Someone rolled a cleaning cart down the hallway. The clock ticked above the whiteboard. Daniel's knees began to hurt, from the tiny chair. Still, he waited. Eventually, Ellie reached into his backpack, he pulled out the folded drawing, and placed it on the desk. Daniel did not touch it. Eli slowly unfolded it himself. The picture was simple: blue water, a brown dock, two stick figures, and above them had drawn a yellow sun, that filled almost half the page. Daniel looked at it for a moment, then he said only one thing: "That looks peaceful." Ellie stared at the picture. Daniel waited again. Another long silence passed, then Ellie looked toward him, his lips moved, but no sound came. Daniel did not lean closer, he did not say, "What?" He did not ask him to repeat himself, he simply stayed where he was, and a few seconds later, Ellie tried again. "Can we go home now?" Daniel felt something tighten in his throat behind him. Mrs. Nolan stopped moving. It was the first time she had heard Eli's voice, but Daniel did not smile too widely, he did not cheer, he did not tell Eli how proud everyone was, he simply stood up and said, "Yeah, we can go home." Ellie folded the drawing once more, then he hesitated. He looked toward Mrs. Nolan, and for perhaps 2 seconds, the classroom became completely still. "Bye." Eli whispered. Mrs. Nolan's eyes filled immediately, but she understood. She gave him the smallest smile. "Bye, Eli." And that was all. In the car, Daniel did not mention what had happened. They drove for several blocks in silence. Then, from the passenger seat, Ellie asked, "Are we having pasta?" Daniel kept his eyes on the road. "If you want pasta." Another pause. "Okay," Daniel nodded. "Pasta it is." For anyone else, it might have sounded like the most ordinary conversation in the world. But to Daniel, ordinary had never sounded so beautiful. Ellie did not suddenly become talkative the next morning. In fact, he said nothing at school for the first hour. Then Mrs. Nolan placed a worksheet on his desk. Ellie looked at it, he raised his hand. Mrs. Nolan walked over. Ellie pointed to one question, and whispered, "I don't understand this one." She sat beside him, and explained it. Nothing more was made of it. 2 days later, a boy named Mason asked Eli whether he wanted the green marker. Ellie nodded. Then, after Mason turned away, Ellie said, "Thanks." The following week, Eli answered his name during morning attendance. "Here." Mrs. Nolan simply continued. To the next student that mattered, nobody clapped, nobody stared, nobody turned Eli's voice into a performance. His words were allowed to be ordinary. At home, Daniel noticed changes too. Ellie started leaving one of his books on the living room table, instead of putting everything back into his backpack. Then, a toy car appeared beside it. A week later, Ellie left his jacket hanging by the front door. Overnight, Daniel saw it there the next morning, and understood what it meant. Ellie was beginning to believe he would be coming back. Daniel never told him that. He let the jacket say it for him. Several weeks after that afternoon in the classroom, Mrs. Nolan invited the students to share their projects again. Speaking was still optional. When she reached Eli, she expected him to pass. Instead, he carried his lake drawing to the front of the room. His hands shook slightly. He stood beside Mrs. Nolan for a few seconds, then he pointed to the taller figure. "That's Daniel." A few children looked toward the drawing. Ellie pointed to the smaller one. "That's me." He swallowed. "We went fishing." Mrs. Nolan waited. Ellie looked at the picture one more time. "I liked it." Then he returned to his seat. His entire presentation lasted less than 20 seconds, but Daniel later learned that Mrs. Nolan kept the drawing pinned beside her desk for the rest of the school year. Not because it was the best picture in the class, but because of what happened. After Eli finished, the children did not treat him differently. Someone gave his presentation a small clap, just as they had done for everyone else. Then the next child stood up. Life moved on, and for Eli, that may have been exactly what he needed. Months later, Daniel and Eli sat at the same lake from the drawing. The afternoon was cold and quiet. Neither of them had caught anything. Eli stared at the water, then he asked, "Were you scared when I came to live with you?" Daniel laughed softly. "Terrified." Eli looked surprised. "Really? Really? Why?" Daniel thought about his answer. "Because I wanted to get everything right." Ellie picked at a loose thread on his sleeve. "Did you?" Daniel smiled. "Absolutely not." Ellie laughed. It was not a big laugh, but it was easy, unprotected, the kind of laugh that came without checking whether it was safe first. After a while, Ellie asked another question. "Why did you sit there that day?" Daniel knew exactly which day he meant. "Because you looked like everyone had been waiting for you to do something." Ellie watched him. "So I thought, maybe you needed someone who could wait, without needing anything." Ellie looked back at the lake. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, he leaned slightly against Daniel's shoulder, and Daniel stayed exactly where he was. Sometimes, kindness is not knowing the perfect thing to say. Sometimes, it is proving, quietly, patiently, that another person does not have to hurry, just because the world is waiting. If this story resonated with you, comment. Patience matters, and if someone once gave you time, when you needed it most, share that memory in the comments, because someone reading your words today may need the reminder that patience can be a form of love.